Who are ya?
It's the Toronto Till I Die pre-recorded match preview.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die. I'm Mike Newell and this is match week 7, week 3 of Who Are Ya? This is our show previewing Toronto FC's upcoming opponent in the match week. We're bringing on bloggers, we're bringing on podcast hosts, we're bringing on journalists, and our friends from around Major League Soccer to provide perspectives on their teams ahead of the match day. So much to get into, so little time. So say hello and welcome in my TTID co-host, Jeffrey P. Nesker. Jeff, how you doing, buddy?
That's going to get old real fast. The two things we've got to keep track of: match week 7 and the third episode of
this
this
is probably the
adjunct
last
show.
week I'm going to go into the whole match week thing.
I
we're
would
just going to
suggest
go
it
into
if I
which
could give you a
episode we're in.
note.
Because, like eventually we're going to have bye weeks and we're going to figure out, are we match week 7? But technically it's only match week 6.
It's really hipster. I think we should stop doing it immediately. So yeah,
probably
100%.
right. But hey, still a show, a work in progress. This Saturday, your Reds take on Sporting Kansas City at BMO Field. TFC started to make and bring back the fortress here at home. 2 straight clean sheet victories to start the season at the Vault. Yes, I'm making up that term. You can run with it. You can pan me for it. Feel free. If you feel it's a little bit mid, that's all good. Coming to town is an SKC side who are coming off a 3-2 loss to LA Galaxy, in which they had a 2-0 lead, but lost in a crazy 8 minutes of madness. TFC fans, you know all about that. Here to talk about SKC's start to the season and what TFC can expect to see from the 2013 champs is Jimmy Mack from No Other Pod, which is part of the KC Sports Network. Jimmy, man, thanks for joining us today. How you doing in KC?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Love it. We get a little bit of the Toronto weather that you guys, I'm sure, are very used to here in Kansas City. The rare late March freeze here, so we're bundling up in our winter coats. But it's an exciting time whenever we get to go play in Toronto, because it's not every year at this point with how many teams are in Major League Soccer that we get to travel north of the border. And looking forward to being out there for the first time in like 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, I have stats.
Yeah,
I have
Jeff's
stats.
got
I had to do a triple take.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, I looked on Transfer Market, which I'm remiss to do for obvious reasons, but and then I noticed we haven't played you since we were decent. So this is going to be a great interview. 2019 TFC were MLS Cup finalists. We'll forget about everything that happened after that. You know what I hate about doing this is it consistently reminds me of the decade that we were absolute garbage. And if you look at our record against you guys, it's 4 wins for us, 8 draws, 14 losses for us. The spread is 22 goals for, 41 goals against. And then I looked at the little blurb that said top goal scorers, and this is hilarious. So Dom Dwyer, who scored 0 goals for us in 14 appearances, he scored 4 for you, and everybody's favorite muckraker on the podcasts, CJ Sapong, he also potted 4 for you guys and 1 for us before he insulted the whole club on his way out, but we don't need to talk about that. So yeah, it is wild. It's absolutely wild. Those are the stats, and yeah, ouch.
Yeah, I know. We have not had the best record against you guys. Jeff and I have been fans of this club for a really long time, and there was a period where obviously SKC was the class of the league in a lot of different ways. And really put the hammer to us both home and away. In fact, you guys beat us in our first ever home match in 2007, if we really want to go that far back. But before we start getting into the match proper and start talking about sort of current day status, I wanted to ask, and I'm asking this question of just about anybody who's coming on the show, about what the relationship with the fans are towards the club at the current moment. Given some of the turbulent off-season sort of stuff that happened, the hiring of Gavin Wilkinson and then the firing of Gavin Wilkinson as sporting director, Can you sort of just talk a little bit about how the fans have been reacting to that? And then if just for maybe listeners who aren't fully aware of the situation, if you can give maybe a little bit background there as well.
Sure. How long do you have? Well, buckle up, because it could be a while. So I actually want to go back a little bit before even the hiring of Gavin Wilkinson, and I'll give a little bit of background on why that was problematic here in a second. But Sporting Kansas City had a stretch of 8 or 9 years, I believe, where it was consecutive playoff appearances. They had the 2013 MLS Cup. There was a 2015 U.S. Open Cup. There was a 2017 U.S. Open Cup. There was a stretch, like you said, in sort of that MLS 2.0 phase, where even though Sporting Kansas City was not a New York team or an LA team, they were among the class of the league. And most, if not all of that credit should go to Peter Vermees, who is basically the god of Sporting Kansas City, and I say that because nothing happens at the club, at least in terms of the product on the field, without Peter Vermees giving his blessing. He's the godfather of Sporting Kansas City. He played for Sporting Kansas City, won an MLS Cup when they were the Kansas City Wizards, then became manager of Sporting Kansas City, won an MLS Cup. He's the only guy to do that in the history of MLS, to have an MLS Cup as a player and a manager for the same team.
Wow. And
then 2018, 2019, right as, Toronto FC was sort of in its peak of the last decade, Sporting Kansas City started to hit a little bit more of a lull. People were like, yeah, we've made the playoffs 8 or 9 years in a row, until suddenly that playoff streak ended. But even before then, they were like, well, yeah, we're getting to the second round. Sometimes we're getting to the Western Conference Finals, but then we're losing to Portland at home, or we're not really competing for trophies anymore.
Yeah.
And so there started to be the question of, at what point do we get back to the winning ways? And there were the playoff streak broke, and then last year happened. The 2023 season happened, where Sporting Kansas City goes winless in the first 10 games. They have 3 points and 3 red cards through the first 10 games of the season. And that's where things really hit a boiling point with the fans in terms of the relationship with the club. There had already been, murmurs in the corners of Reddit of the SKC fan base in terms of, is Peter Vermees still up for the job? And most fans at that time, before the season started last year, would say, he's a legend, like, give him time to fix things. Well, then the 10-game stretch happens. There are credible articles coming out from the Kansas City Star saying that the ownership group is having serious conversations of, is Peter Vermees the guy? They decide to stick with him. He turns it around. They have the best run of form across the league, just about. It's like a top 3 run of form in terms of points per game, to barely claw their way into the playoffs, beat St. Louis City, our main rival, twice pretty handily. And suddenly things are feeling okay, but there are still lingering questions. But you're like, okay, get through this offseason. Nothing crazy happens this offseason. Start off better. We're going to be fine. Then the bombshell news hits of Sporting Kansas City's hiring disgraced former Portland Timbers executive Gavin Wilkinson for a sporting director role. And he's going to report up through Peter Vermees. And for those who don't know, you can go online, Google Gavin Wilkinson. The Athletic's done plenty of great reporting. There's the Yates report. I have read much more of that report now than I ever have cared to have read. But Gavin Wilkinson, while not accused himself of doing any specific abuse, was in charge of the Portland Timbers organization, and at some point the Portland Thorns organization, while some of the alleged abusers were in power. And you can read all about recommendations he gave or didn't give or whatnot, etc. Sporting Kansas City hires him. Fan outcry. 8 days later, he's fired, and Sporting's a little combative, I would say, in terms of their statements, both to the media, myself included, and to fans who were saying, like, well, why did you even do this in the first place? There was never any real apology. There was never any real justification, and there was never really any accountability. So that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And then this year certainly got off to a better start than last year, but there's still the lingering doubts of, is Peter the guy? Is he focusing? Is he too rigid? Can he do this in MLS 3.0? And then a game like the Galaxy game happens last week, where you have a 2-0 lead at home. You see out that game, and you're near the top of the Western Conference, even though it's 5 games into the season. And to have it collapse the way it did, it brought all the questions of Peter Vermees for much of the fan base right back to the forefront. And so I don't think a single loss does that if there's not already a strained relationship between the fan base and the club. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of saying it's this really weird deal where you have this club legend who one day his name will be hanging. Well, his name is hanging as a sporting legend in the stadium, but he will be honored even more one day. But right now, there are a number of fans who have questions and as to what the future of this club should be.
Okay.
So interesting. All these coincidences, because, you know, you're talking about the epochal moment that was last weekend's capitulation of the LA Galaxy, who of course are coached by Greg Vanney, who was our Peter Vermees, right? So, you know, when we were having our long divorce from Greg Vanney, we were looking at you guys, and I constantly look at you guys because I wonder what it must be like to have the faith, that unyielding faith in the gaffer. Well, everything around you, I mean, you said it yourself, MLS through 2.0, MLS 3.5, you know, here comes Messi, right? And you guys are putting your faith in your gaffer. I'm an Arsenal fan. I believe in giving the manager enough time to instigate their systems and not firing by knee jerk, but that's not what we're talking about here, right? He's a legend. It's any way you slice it, it's going to be a tough. I don't want to say, I'll say divorce because I can't find another word. How split is the fan base? Is it 50-50? Is it boredom? Like, I mean, you've been covering the team for a while. Do you think it's boredom, or do you think it's lack of results and the feeling that you're getting left in the dust of the Inter Miamis and the other newer sides?
Sure. I think it's a perfect storm of a few things that are happening. The club has been around for a long time. It's an MLS original. They hit gold when they did the rebrand from the Kansas City Wizards to Sporting Kansas City, and they built Children's Mercy Park, which at the time was Live Strong Park and has gone through some iterations. But that was one of the better soccer-specific stadiums an MLS club had built at the time. Now it's, 15 years old almost. It's on the smaller end of stadiums. The league has expanded. Teams like Toronto have come in. Teams like St. Louis City have come in 3 hours down the road, the closest team we've ever had. And you see a stadium that they built that's 30,000 people strong where you go there. And I've been there twice. It's a deafening atmosphere. It's a fantastic atmosphere. Their fan base is incredible. The game day experience there for fans, from the food, from the lighting, from the parties around, it's a really good product. Sporting Kansas City's, for one reason or another, probably product on the field, probably just, it's been 27 years. There's that excitement wanes a little bit. The game day atmosphere starts to go down. Not only is St. Louis City down the road, the Kansas City Current, the women's team in the NWSL, just built their stadium in downtown Kansas City. They just had their first game there. There was 12,000 people there screaming their lungs out. I was at that game and then went to the Sporting game later that night against the San Jose Earthquakes. And not only did all the media who were at both games say, this feels kind of flat tonight compared to where we were before, Tim Melia, the goalkeeper for Sporting Kansas City, in the locker room after the game goes, I don't know if people were tired or what, but it felt a little flat tonight. So there's so much going on in terms of soccer in MLS, but also here in Kansas City, that I don't think Sporting is used to from both an on and off field standpoint, having to keep up with this quick evolution of both the on-field product and the fan experience product. And they're trying now. They've made some good steps in the offseason in terms of game day atmosphere and whatnot. But I think they got a little too complacent, if I'm being honest. And now
it happens.
To catch up.
Yeah, it does happen. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was about to steal your question because it's a good one, but go ahead.
Go ahead, steal
it. It's interesting because you brought up Toronto FC a few times in terms of how they fit into your experience with Sporting Kansas City, sort of evolving with the league. So I got to ask, what is obviously you don't know anything about what happened to us between 2019 and now, right? Like, because you don't follow the Eastern Conference, which is amazing. But what is the perception of Toronto FC among Sporting Kansas City fans?
I think most Sporting Kansas City fans would still say Toronto FC has a pretty good reputation. As Sporting Kansas City was getting popular, that was, I would say the peak Sporting Kansas City fandom was probably, 2014 to 2017, like immediately after MLS Cup. That's when Josie Altidore, Giovinco, Michael Bradley, Toronto was starting to get on the upswing. And then you see those MLS Cups and the rivalry with Seattle and whatnot. Obviously, that era is not what Toronto's in now. They're attempting to rebuild and get back
charitable. There. Thank you.
Yeah,
but I don't think a lot of sporting fans have really been paying attention to know truly the struggles that maybe Toronto's had in the last handful of years, because we've been
You guys
going
are
through
my
them
favorite.
So, there's been so much more of a focus on what's wrong internally with Sporting Kansas City that I don't think there's been much to be able to be like, hey, look, Toronto, they're struggling. It's more of just let's worry about our own house first, and then we'll figure out what's going on.
no,
I'll tell
that's
you
fair.
one thing that SKC doesn't have to worry about, and that's Argyle kits. Maybe easily my favorite kit of this year's drop, like Bellissimo. Those Argyle like only have Argyle kits. I know I don't really get a seat at the table, but oh my god, my god, yeah, Argyle kits rule. That was my 3 giant run on questions.
No,
Mike.
all good, Jeffy. You're on fire. You gotta let you go.
Am I? This is bad. Stop, drop, and roll.
Look, like I think, yeah, you're right. I think obviously, again, we haven't played you guys since 2019, right? The last time you saw us, we were heading towards an MLS Cup, an probable MLS Cup final.
Yeah.
But an MLS Cup final since. And it's funny you talk about a lot of the internal sort of dialogue fans are having with the club, and the club probably is having with itself. A lot of that mirrors what's been happening with Toronto FC since essentially the end of the pandemic season, where there was sort of monumental change, not just with the head coach and Greg Vanny, but a lot of the backroom staff that you don't see every day also left. Obviously, Tim Bezbachenko heading to Columbus and taking some key people with him. And now you see kind of the replicated success that he had here in Toronto now being replicated in Columbus. So a lot of that it mirrors, and in a lot of ways, these clubs kind of mirror each other in an interesting way. But like getting specifically into the match on Saturday, obviously you guys are coming off of a disappointing loss. Who are sort of the danger men that you think Peter Vermes is going to be relying on Saturday to try to bounce back from a disappointing home loss?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Alan Pulido. He's our designated player striker / attacking midfielder. He's the most expensive signing in Sporting Kansas City history. We don't know the exact cost, but it's somewhere between 10 and 11 million US. He has been mixed in terms of results on the field. When he is on, he's got 20 goal a year potential. He's been a little slow to start this year. He's got 1 goal. He almost had a banger of a bicycle kick against the Galaxy early in the game. So he's always dangerous. What is interesting, and I'm curious if Peter Vermes will do this weekend against Toronto, is he did something last week that he's really not done in a long time, at least. He's typically known for his 4-3-3 formation. Yes. He's got a striker, he's got 2 wingers, he's got a number 10 attacking midfielder, a box-to-box 8, a 6, and then the standard back line across. He kind of switched it to a 4-5-1 or a 4-2-3-1, if you will, and that largely stemmed from Johnny Russell, our captain, who plays the right wing, was injured. And our backup winger, Kyrie Shelton, was injured. So we had to figure out, okay, what do we do now? So what he actually did is he dropped Alan Pulido from striker to that number 10 attacking midfielder spot, which Pulido has a tendency to drop deep anyway. Put in Willie Agata, who joined the club a couple seasons ago and had he won the club golden boot after only playing in like 9 games at the end of 2022. Had a great season. Then put Eric Tommy, who's typically our number 10 on the right wing, and Daniel Shallowy on the left wing. We had sort of this almost attacking diamond with 2 strikers sort of playing off of each other. That's never really happened in quite a long time. And if you look at 2 goals scored, that's all well and good. But if you look at the expected goals from the game against the Galaxy, it was just over 3, according to MLSsoccer.com. And up until this point this season, the highest that we had was 1.2. So there were good things to come from this. The attack looks good. The flip side is the defense kind of fell apart, and the defense fell apart largely on set pieces. And that's been the Achilles heel of Sporting Kansas City. Even Tamilia, for the first time, I've heard a player publicly call out set pieces after the game last week. He said, another set piece goal. And so that's sort of the thing for Sporting Kansas City to watch. And I know I haven't had a chance to watch a ton of Toronto, but you have a very stout defense and okay offense, it seems, on the year so far. They're not banging in 2-3 goals a game, but it's going to be interesting to see. It's sort of like Sporting's offense was its strength last week, and Toronto's defense seems very much like a strength. And then it's sort of the weaknesses on the inverse. I'm really curious to see how these two teams play against each other when their two strengths are going head to head.
Yeah, I'm curious as well because definitely TFC have two different personalities. A road personality where, like you said, it's very much about stout defending, being very difficult to beat, and using sort of your DPs to then create moments for you in attack. That's the road TFC. The home TFC tend to be a little bit more front foot, or try to be a little bit more front foot in terms of the way we play. We play with a back three. We have two wing backs. This seems to be the fashionable way to play right now in MLS. A lot of teams are sort of adopting the three back system. Obviously, we don't have Lorenzo Insigne most likely for this game on Saturday, so you guys catch a break there. But we also now are seeming to be getting an informed Federico Bernardeschi, and a very hungry-looking Federico Bernardeschi. So that will be interesting to see, as he probably will be leaned on a little bit more from an offensive perspective to carry the team a bit. And I think it goes without saying, yes, Alan Pulido. From a striker position, we would love to have Alan Pulido.
Oh my God,
he's got a slow start. We would trade to have Alan Pulido right now, because I think one of the big concerns, and it's one that is not new to TFC, it's been around really since even last year, is just the number 9 position, right? Just having a consistent 9 that can score goals and finish off chances. Prince Owosu got sort of the monkey off his back a little bit this weekend, getting a goal. We'll see if that sort of proceeds into the next game. But it's an interesting matchup of styles, I think, in terms of just the way that this is going to all play out. And you guys, you haven't won on the road yet, but 2 draws on the road. So you, again, sort of I wonder if you guys sort of mirror the same type of hard to beat mentality on the road in terms of the way you play.
Yeah, it's interesting because Peter Vermees's hallmark is he doesn't typically change his style all that much. It's a very high octane, possession oriented style that he likes to play, and he tends to try to keep doing that on the road. Now there are some places like Houston where they're sort of
impossible,
a monkey on our back, and so we kind of change that up a little bit, but Sporting found a lot of success against the Galaxy early on in the game with a high press. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, especially with a back three there, if the wingbacks are pushing forward for Toronto, if Sporting sort of replicates that high press, because they created a lot of big chances against the Galaxy by forcing turnovers in the back line and then just doing quick counter shots, 1-2 passes. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do that again. Now, the finishing needs a little work. Sporting scored 2 goals last week. They probably could have scored 4 or 5. So could have the Galaxy, because the Galaxy had 2 goals called back for offside that were just offside. But it really will be interesting. Sporting's fullbacks like to push up too. They don't play a back 5. They play a just standard 4-man back line. But those fullbacks really do like to push up and overlap with the wingers. So if they're up in the attack and Toronto can sort of get possession or muck up the midfield a little bit, there'll be an opportunity for some speed down the wings for Toronto to get some real good counters.
Fantastic. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be an interesting matchup. It really will be, because it's one of those things where, again, just both teams haven't seen each other in a while, right? Yeah. So it's like, there's no Roger Espinoza, there's no, like the last time I think we played, Matt Beasler, I think, was still on SKC, or may have just gone on. No,
probably Beasler, Roger Espinoza, Iko Para, Benny Feilhaber.
They were all on the team.
Yeah, the podcast boys.
Yeah,
they did a great podcast for a while over the Pando. Yeah,
so it's definitely a new SKC that Toronto FC fans are going to be seeing. Before we sort of wrap up here, one of the things I'm always curious about in terms of just other teams in MLS. Obviously, we talked about perception of Toronto FC in the market, but generally, MLS has grown so much, and Jeff was touching on it a bit earlier. As a fan of a team that was an original MLS club, what are sort of the biggest kind of changes that you've seen in this new MLS that you sort of
Don't
have
start
seen
with
sort of the
Messi.
evolution the years have gone through. Yeah.
I will not start with Messi. Messi, as we were talking about before we started recording, probably is not going to actually play in Kansas City. There's a pretty good likelihood he won't because they have a CONCACAF Champions Cup game 2 days before. So they moved it from Children's Mercy Park to Arrowhead Stadium to accommodate 72,000 people to see Messi. Now he probably won't play. So Messi's a touchy subject. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is it's expanded so quickly as a league, MLS has, and the investment in soccer specific stadiums and creating like true fan atmospheres is so incredible. You know, whether it's a place like St. Louis just down the road, or Austin, or Minnesota, or Atlanta, or Charlotte, what have you, these places that are creating these incredible stadiums. They have incredible fan bases. You know, we'll see if they can keep that up 25 years from now. But I think there's almost, I don't know if envy is quite the right word, but there are a lot of questions being asked, not just of the club, but even discussions amongst the fan base and the supporters groups themselves. Are like, okay, what sort of evolution do we need to make to be able to match what we see other clubs doing? And then there's the on-field investment part of it, where Sporting historically hasn't really invested a ton in terms of high-value, high-dollar players. Peter's MO for a while was go find the wily MLS vet that you can get on a good deal and maximize the most that you can get out of him. Almost like in a Belichick type, Bill Belichick for him, and type, fashion. That's not really working anymore. Teams are finding younger designated players that they're able to come in and really help develop, and then sell off to Europe for a higher profit, and then kind of wash, rinse, repeat. So I think there's a desire for Sporting to open up the pocketbook a little bit more. And, Peter Vermes implied that there might be some changes coming as soon as the summer to MLS salary rules, and that might allow it for a little bit more. We'll see. But spending to produce results in the field and the fan game day atmosphere, those are two things that I think from a Sporting perspective, the league has done a pretty good job at. And Sporting would like to be able to catch up.
The whole time you were talking, I was just thinking to myself of the old adage, slow and steady wins the race. And honestly, I don't know if it feels that way at ground level, where you're sitting, but, from my soapbox looking down, it must be cool to like pick what you want to take, because this stuff costs money, right? And you're in a position to spend wisely. It's like, okay, well, that worked in St. Louis. Maybe that isn't working in Austin. What are we going to spend our money well on? And I think that applies to your recruitment strategy as well, right? TFC have never been afraid to swing big, but we have as many, if not more, failures, where we're stuck in sunk cost fallacy and all that other nonsense that comes when you spend a ton of money and you're not getting results. It's very easy to be on the fence and stagnate, which is what I'm feeling is where your frustration is coming from. But certainly, when you get that money, I have a feeling that you're going to spend it a lot better. And it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, I have such tremendous respect because of all the things that your fan base is kind of deriding now, which is this desire to sort of do it, not, Colorado on the cheap, but do it smart and on the cheap, right? And flex those things. And I agree with you. I think that, MLS enjoyed a position where they were kind of on an island, but now we're part of the global soccer mosaic, right? We've got scouts from other leagues. We need to work on developing relationships with other clubs and not getting rinsed by them, because you go into business with South America, they see dollar signs. You talk about, salary cap, and they're like, we don't care. Give us the $10 million transfer fee. So it's going to be really interesting watching the really measured approach that Sporting Kansas City takes into whatever you want to call it, MLS 3.8, whatever it is. I think that you guys are in pole position to do it in a really measured way, whereas some of us are losing our minds just writing check after check after check, like just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. So I hope that gives you some positivity while you feel, the sting of all the big shiny everywhere else. I mean, but that's just what I took out of it. And
or you could just go on transfer market and sign a European winner for $50 million.
Yeah. Believe me, there are those fans who are like, it's easy. I fixed the club. This is all you got to do. You just go get him, boom, easy, done. doesn't quite work that way
Yeah.
in reality.
Oh yeah, replace the entire starting lineup in one transfer window. What's the problem with you guys? Like, why
Yeah.
aren't you doing it? So
exactly.
yeah. It's a crazy league that we live in, and these are always so illuminating for me. I really do like doing this, Mike. This was a great idea. I love talking to in depth with people from other teams, and blew my mind that we haven't faced off against you guys since 2019. That was wild.
It's such a bummer. Toronto's like one of the top 3 places I want to get to, and it just didn't work out timing wise this year. Because when I knew we were playing Toronto, I was like, I'm going to make that trip, and then it's like, but it's the weekend I can't do it, and so it sucks. I'm hoping that it's not going to be another 5 years before I get the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, you better get in touch with us, because the first drink's on us, my friend.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well,
Jimmy Mack, thank you so much for joining us on Who Are Ya this week. We really appreciate your insight on Sporting Kansas City. Good luck this weekend. Not too much luck, because we got 10 points after 5 matches. We're like living in dreamland right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And for everybody, thank you for tuning in to Who Are Ya, a Toronto Till I Die preview show. Again, big thank you to Jimmy Mack from No Other Pod. Check out their pods wherever you get your pods. Jimmy, any other places that you want to shout out your socials or anything else in terms of the pod or the KC Sporting Network?
Sure. Yeah. Check us out. KCSN Soccer is what you can search on the podcast network. So we got our Sporting KC episode that drops every week, and also a Kansas City Current episode for NWSL.
Awesome.
But yeah, you can check us out. No Other Pod on socials. Check me out. JCMax03 on socials. And yeah, love to chat.
All right, perfect.
Awesome.
And for Toronto Till I Die, most of you who are listening already know how to do this, but in case you are new, we are on Instagram. If you haven't already followed us there, username is TTID Show, or search Toronto Till I Die to find us. And then, of course, if you're listening on podcasts, you've already found us, but also just search Toronto Till I Die on YouTube, on anywhere you get your podcasts, to find both this show and our regular Toronto Till I Die show that runs live Monday evenings at 7 Eastern. On behalf of Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Jimmy Mack, I'm Mike Newell. We'll see you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Who are ya?
It's the Toronto Till I Die pre-recorded match preview.